Let's take it back to 2015, the Victory Day parade in Moscow's Red Square. The Western world collectively held its breath as the tarps came off and the sound of steel tracks ground against the pavement. What they saw shattered every rule of traditional tank design. This wasn't the flat, pancake-shaped Soviet tank we were used to seeing during the Cold War, ones that were notoriously mocked for being absolute death traps. This was angular, futuristic, and featured a completely unmanned turret. On paper, Western military analysts were practically sweating, estimating it was at least 10 years ahead of anything the US or NATO had. They called it the T-14 Armata, a tank billed as an absolute game-changer for ground warfare, prompting European defense ministries to hold emergency meetings just to assess the threat. But flash forward to the current conflicts today, we're witnessing the most intense, brutal tank-on-tank warfare we've seen in decades, fought in absolute mud and ruins. So the multi-million-dollar question the entire defense community is asking is, where the hell is this game-changing tank? Why aren't we seeing it flex its muscles on the actual front lines? Instead, we just get heavily edited footage of it driving around miles behind the combat zone or rolling down parade routes. Today, we're diving deep into the mystery of the T-14 Armata. Is it the ultimate weapon of the future just biding its time? Or is it nothing more than an insanely expensive piece of propaganda designed to scare the West? Before we figure out where it's hiding, we need to understand exactly why it caused such massive panic when it dropped. The T-14's secret sauce isn't just slapping thicker steel onto a chassis to make it heavier. It's a completely radical design philosophy that threw the old rulebook right out the window. Picture a traditional tank. Your crew, the commander and the gunner, sit right inside the turret. That's the highest, most visible, and most vulnerable part of the vehicle. To make matters worse, they're basically sitting right on top of the main ammo carousel. If an enemy round pierces that turret armor, it's game over. The ammo cooks off, detonates all at once, and the sheer explosive force blows the multi-ton turret dozens of feet into the air. In the military world, they call this the jack-in-the-box effect. It's a fatal design flaw. Russian engineers decided to fix this once and for all. They took all 3 crew members completely out of the turret and placed them in a heavily armored titanium capsule buried deep inside the front of the hull. It's essentially a personalized blast bunker inside the tank, completely sealed off from the ammo compartment. Moving to an unmanned turret is a massive engineering flex. It makes the turret smaller, lighter, and a much harder target to hit. Plus, even if the turret takes a direct hit from an anti-tank missile and the ammo detonates, the crew sitting down below in that titanium tub still has a very high chance of surviving. It is a monumental leap forward in crew survivability. Beyond the safety capsule, the T-14 rocks the latest generation of explosive reactive armor called Malachit. This isn't just your standard bolt-on armor. It allegedly uses magnetic sensors to react incredibly fast, detonating to disrupt and destroy incoming kinetic energy penetrators from Western tanks before they even touch the main hull. But the real nightmare fuel for NATO is the Afghanit Active Protection System, or APS. It works alongside an AESA radar, the exact same cutting-edge radar tech you'd find in 5th-generation fighter jets like the F-35 or F-22. Think of it like the tank having its own personal iron dome. It constantly scans 360 degrees. When an anti-tank missile comes screaming in, the onboard computers calculate the trajectory in a fraction of a second, 0 human input required, and fire interceptor charges to blow the missile out of the sky before it ever makes contact. Add in the 12.5-centimeter 2A82.1M main gun, which Russia claims has 17% more muzzle energy than the Leopard 2's gun, and you start to see why this brochure spec sheet gave NATO leaders sleepless nights. Now, to really put the T-14's tech into perspective, we have to pit it against its ultimate American rival. The US response, designed specifically to counter next-gen threats like the Armata, is the AbramsX concept tank. Let's look at the tail of the tape, comparing these two titans pound for pound, complete with rough order of magnitude or ROM estimates in USD. Looking at these specs, the first thing that jumps out is that the US basically agreed with Russia's design philosophy. The AbramsX reduced its crew from 4 to 3, moved everyone down into the hull, and adopted an unmanned turret to maximize survivability. They saw the T-14 and said, yeah, that's actually the right move. But the US completely flexed when it came to the power plant. We all know the legacy M1 Abrams uses a gas turbine engine that drinks fuel like a jet engine on afterburner, creating massive logistical headaches. The AbramsX ditches that for a hybrid diesel-electric engine. Not only does this cut fuel consumption by 50%, but it introduces a killer feature called Silent Watch. Imagine a 50-ton steel monster that can creep through a forest on pure electric power. No roaring diesel engine, no massive thermal heat signature blowing out the exhaust for drones to lock onto. It essentially turns the tank into a ghost assassin on the battlefield. When it comes to firepower, the T-14 might pack a larger 125mm gun compared to the Abrams-X's 120mm, but the US is betting that size isn't everything. They leveled the playing field by integrating highly advanced AI targeting systems. Imagine a chaotic screen inside the tank filled with data. The AI acts like a digital co-pilot, putting a red box around the highest threat targets and saying, "Shoot this guy first." It drastically reduces cognitive overload for the crew in high-stress combat. In modern warfare, whoever spots the enemy first, processes the data faster, and shoots accurately wins. Furthermore, the American Trophy APS is battle-tested. It has survived absolute meat grinders in the Middle East. The Russian Afghanit system? It's still just a brochure spec that hasn't survived a real large-scale war. The ultimate plot twist here, though, is the bottom line, the price. A base T-14 hull comes in around $4 million USD, whereas the Abrams-X starts well over $10 million. When you look at the life cycle ROM, factoring in 15 years of maintenance, specialized ammo, tech crews, and simulator training, fielding just one Abrams-X could cost the military around $30 million. The T-14 is estimated at closer to $12 million. It just goes to show that while Western tech is packed with sci-fi sensors and AI, it comes with a massive price tag that will absolutely tear through a defense budget. But guys, no matter how sweet the specs or the price tag of the T-14 look on paper, it brings us to the harsh reality of today. And it answers the burning question, why is the T-14 totally MIA in the current conflict? The hard truth is, Russia's problem isn't that the tank is garbage or the tech is inferior. The real problem is a massive production bottleneck and the country's crippled economy. Back during the 2015 reveal, Russia boldly promised to churn out 2,300 T-14s by 2020 to completely modernize their armored forces. But when it came time to actually build them, they hit a brick wall. Mass-producing a next-gen tank by the thousands requires a massive, highly skilled workforce and supply chains with millimeter precision. Russia's production lines fell drastically behind. Today, reports suggest only a few dozen fully assembled units actually exist, and they're mostly used for morale-boosting parades or as test beds, rather than actual combat units. The root cause? High-end sensors and microelectronics. You have to understand that modern tanks aren't just thick steel and big guns anymore. They're supercomputers on tracks. They rely on incredibly high-resolution thermal imagers to spot enemies hiding in the brush miles away at night. They need lightning-fast processing chips and top-tier sensors. Historically, the Russian defense industry couldn't produce these domestically and relied heavily on importing them from Western giants, primarily in France. But when crushing economic sanctions hit after 2014, Russia was completely cut off from that tech supply chain. Without those Western parts, the fire control systems and the digital brains of the T-14 ground to a halt. No chips, no tanks. It's that simple. On top of that, in a war that is bleeding the national budget dry by the minute, resource management is everything. Instead of dumping massive amounts of capital into trying to force a luxury prototype like the T-14 onto the battlefield, it makes way more economic sense to take thousands of older, familiar T-72s and T-90s out of storage, Slap some extra ERA and new radios on them and send them to the front. It creates a much faster, wider impact on the battlefield. Even the Russian Defense Ministry practically admitted that the Armata is simply too expensive to risk in today's combat environment. Because the modern battlefield has fundamentally changed, it has become an execution ground for expensive, heavy armor. Today, a cheap FPV kamikaze drone, literally made of plastic and cheap motors for a few $100, flown by a soldier wearing VR goggles in a trench miles away at night, can drop an anti-tank grenade right on the turret roof or the engine deck. Those are the thinnest armored points on a tank. Just like that, a multi-million-dollar machine goes up in flames. When the risk is that insanely high, sending your flagship Pride and Joy tank just to get blown up on camera is a massive psychological and PR disaster that simply isn't worth it. To wrap this up, the T-14 Armata is not just some fake, hollow prop. The technology is real, it's highly advanced, and it absolutely forced the West to pivot and adapt. Just look at the AbramsX. The T-14 is basically the concept car at an auto show. It proves what the future of warfare looks like and paves the way for new tech. But it crashed headfirst into a brutal reality check. Massive tech sanctions, industrial manufacturing limits, and the ruthless real-world economics of modern warfare. So, for now, the T-14 Armata remains an invisible phantom, a predator that still hasn't officially started its hunt. So, what do you guys think? After diving deep into this tale of the tape, if these two future titans actually met on the battlefield, T-14 versus AbramsX, who's coming out on top? Or do you think the era of the massive, heavily armored, multi-million-dollar main battle tank is gone forever, replaced by swarms of cheap drones? Let's get a debate going down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next military and tech breakdown. Mick here, signing off. I'll see you guys in the next video.